If people are so good, then why did they kill all these incredibly good people in the Bible? Why did they do such horrible things to all these incredibly good people in the Bible? If people are not just Jesus, think if he would have lived, as I put out there before, the world would have been so much better. And if he became king, do you know what the world would have been like if Jesus actually became the King of Kings? How unbelievably blessed the world would be, because he was born to be the King of Kings, not some scumbag pauper, meaning how the world looks at it, some incredibly poor person who has no means, no influence, but the King of Kings. Do you know what the world would be like? It would be incredibly awesome. But they kill Jesus. They kill the disciples. They kill all of the others. And they do. And God watches. That's the whole point of Revelations. If you don't understand Revelations, the last book of the New Testament, then you're an idiot. Because as I fought to take care of my mother, my father, my brother Richard, who was sickly, my younger brother John, and help out with my sister and older brother, and then help out the neighborhood, help out the old people in the neighborhood, cutting their grass and shoveling their snow. Yes, I got money for it, but they needed the labor. No one else was doing it. Truly, if I wasn't doing it, they would have been doing it. So I saved those old people from having heart attacks or strokes shoveling heavy, wet snow and all kinds of other physical labor that would have just been neglected, because in our neighborhood, we didn't have landscapers that drove by and did these things. There was none of that. So believe me, I lived next door to an old lady on my right side, an old lady on my left side on Drake. Both of them that owned the residence were two old women. And I interacted with them. And they were super nice. Now, the male who lived there on the one side, if you're looking at my house on Drake facing outward, on the left side, if I'm facing outward, he was sometimes kind of a jerk. But again, these older people, I was supplying a much needed labor source. And I used to go up and carol during Christmas to the older people. I targeted older people. Scumbags targeted them to screw them over. I targeted them to make their life better, to bring a smile to their face, to make them happy. I did. That was the whole point. Now, my mom did me a solid when I asked her to buy me some Christmas music songbooks. I needed 3, and she did buy me 3 of them, so we could go out at Christmas time caroling. But we didn't knock on every door. We just went to the old people. Truly, the single old people, and most of them were older women. And we would knock on the door, they would come to the door, and we would sing different Christmas hymns. Now, you can do that, unlike they do with the Mormons when they knock on the door. how about if they came and sang different Christian hymns? Like, I love Jesus or something else. And you went caroling, but not for Christmas songs, but you went caroling from door to door through the different seasons. And then in Christmas, obviously, there's a bunch of Christian hymns mixed in, but I'm talking about in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, going caroling. And you knock on the doors and you sing wonderful Christian hymns. Wouldn't that be kind of awesome? Now, I know we have to be worried about, if they're Jewish or they Muslim or so on. But wouldn't they appreciate the gesture? But again, this is the whole thing about integrated societies, which causes problems. You knock on one door, they love you, singing Christmas hymns. You knock on another door, and they're like, you're violating my civil rights, bringing that Christian music here. I'm Muslim, I'm Jewish, I'm Hindu, I'm Buddhist, I'm Taoist, I'm Confucius. How dare you? And believe me, I looked at all the cases. Like, after a football game, they sued this high school. An atheist did. He sued the high school because after the football game, the team met in the middle of the field. Whether it was their home field or they were away, they would meet at the middle of the field, just their team, and they would kneel down and pray. The one thing that struck me that was good about East St. Louis when we were in a state championship game, the wall was between us. We were 5A, they were 6A. They won. We should have won, but, a bunch of players went out and did drugs and alcohol the night before the state championship game. They went out, our star players, partying, doing drugs and alcohol before the state championship game. And it cost us. We should have crushed Peoria Richwood. I mean, crushed them. But, again, they decided, and they ruined it for everybody. And they did. We were set to go to Cincinnati to play Moeller, to find out who was the best high school football team in the country. But we lost the game, so we didn't go. If we won the state championship game, which we should have easily, and our quarterback, Josh, who was the one who urinated on my helmet continuously, he was the GOAT. Think of God's will. Josh steps on the quarterback's foot. Instead of firing outward, he stepped backwards and he stepped on Eric Dalquist's foot, locking it in place. And Josh is the guard, not the center. Vic was the center. He stepped backwards. He wasn't supposed to step backwards. He was supposed to fire up and then move backwards. Because if you know anything about pass blocking, but instead he stepped backwards, and when he stepped backwards, Josh stepped on Eric's foot. And Eric fell down, because it's not like in the pros. It was a pass play, and the wide receivers were open. Actually, all the wide receivers were wide open. All he had to do is just flick the ball up in the air. But he fell down with the ball, and it was the last play of the game. We were on the goal line. We should have won. He should have just ran the ball, but the pass play was the right call. But the whole point is, getting to this situation, Josh, who did me wrong, him and Benji, Josh goes down into history as the piece of shit that stepped back on the quarterback's foot. And we watched the tape over and over again, and Paul Adams said, "Josh, what are you thinking? What the hell?" And he ripped into him, costing us the state championship game. You freaking piece of garbage. You little shitbag. Now, he didn't use those words exactly, but boy, did he give him an earful, and he replayed it. You're a piece of garbage, Josh. You're a piece of garbage, Josh. You're a piece of garbage, Josh. Righteousness! So he'll go down in history, and has, as costing Deerfield High School the state championship. He will always be remembered, and all the players know it was him. We watched the film together, our last meeting, going over the game film, showing what a piece of garbage he was. Again and again, replaying that moment. God is great. Now, think of Noah. God made a mistake. He let Noah take some people that weren't quite sin-free. And those individuals contaminate it. So Revelation says, all those with sin will not be spared. They will be put to waste. So either you're sin-free or you're condemned. But the point is, I think back on all these good people, like my whole life. All I did was help people. And I busted my ass my whole life to be good, to help, to help, to help. And from childhood on, been molested, been raped, and been many other evil things. I don't know how many times people have tried to kill me. They dosed my thing with acid, my drink, this guy did. And you name it. Fucking pieces of shit. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I watch. And as God said to me in 2016, he watched back after I made my announcement to see how you treat me. To see if it made any difference to you. As Jesus started his ministry and made his announcement, God watched. Would people change? And what did they do? They plotted against him, deprived him, killed him, stripped him of everything. And that means a future wife. Because if Jesus wasn't put on the cross, he would have married. And he would have had kids. And so would the other disciples have had very good lives. So we'll go back to the one disciple who didn't die. And I'll put that on Tumblr. But again, these evil people get away with it. Always destroying the goodness so their filth can triumph. So they're pieces of garbage. Like this Hispanic guy. He turns his head and gives me a nasty look just now. I didn't turn my head to him. He turned his head to me. giving me some kind of disapproving look. This is what I'm talking about. The government started this. We were 90-something% white. You flooded into minorities, and then you act as we're wrong. But if we invaded their country, what would they do? So when it goes on the other foot, I watched. And they weren't too freaking happy. Saying, oh, this and that. Truly, we moved out of Japan. We moved out of China after the war. We moved out of Germany and that. We kept troops there, but they stayed on the base. We gave them back their country. Big difference. And going to the U.S., let's go back. World War I. We won, and we gave them back their country. And we didn't take any land. Poland and other nations did. And we weren't the ones asking for big reparations. It was all the European nations beating on Germany, not the United States. And then we have World War II. And we win in the Pacific. And we win in Europe. And then we do the investment plans. And we give them back their country. Truly, we have a base in the Philippines, but we pulled out of the Philippines. We gave them back their country. Then we go on to the Korean War. We go in supporting South Korea. We push back North Korea. We sign a peace treaty. We set up a demilitarized zone. We give them back their country. Yes, we maintain a base in South Korea to defend a demilitarized zone, keeping South Korea and North Korea from hurting each other. In Vietnam, we negotiated a peace, but this time we fully pulled out, and North Vietnam didn't honor the peace and invaded South Vietnam and slaughtered, and you get 200 to 400,000 people, the Vietnamese boat people, of the Vietnamese boat people, which I think was 1 million something, about 200 to 400,000 of them drowned in the ocean trying to get to America. But again, we gave them back their country. We invaded Iraq, the first Gulf War. We withdrew, gave them back their country. Then we get the second Gulf War. And we invade, and then we keep forces there, but we still give them back their country. Temporarily keep forces there, right? And then we invade Afghanistan. That's the next war after the second Gulf War, the War on Terror. And because Taliban, which bin Laden was part of Al-Qaeda, but he went to the Taliban, so he moved terrorist organizations. And we go in after the Taliban because bin Laden was in Afghanistan. And what do? Again, we invest in Afghanistan. We build power plants. We help build roads and other things. And we withdraw and give them back their country. And then what do? We get ISIS. So each time we leave these people to their own, and remember, those people are minorities in the United States. And each time we leave these minorities alone with each other, they kill each other. And we have to keep on getting in between their feuds, stopping them from killing each other. And the majority of all the people that were sacrificed were white Americans all over the globe, getting killed, trying to keep minorities from killing each other. White Americans. So I don't get it. And we can go the 1.2 million white Americans that died in the Civil War. Now, the only one that has anything to say, and I don't see him talking much, is Native Americans. Because we came in peace, but we didn't control the flow coming in. And when we didn't control the flow coming in, the Pilgrims, there was no way to control immigration, and people heard about the Pilgrims, and word spread. All these people started flooding over, good with very bad people. And so the Native Americans naturally pushed back. And the reason why I say this is the same when you see white supremacist groups. The model is absolutely the same. You see Native Americans see the great influx of white people, pushing them back, taking their territory, changing their way of life, and they become racist. It didn't start off that way because both sides, that's where Thanksgiving comes from, loved each other and saw the benefits of mutual trade. Oh yes, the Pilgrims were traders, not military. And they brought over farming and agricultural and other technologies with them, which they shared with the Native Americans, so the Native Americans could be less nomadic. See, all the Native American tribes were nomadic. They moved depending on the season and depending on where the game was. They followed the buffalo in places. And so they were nomadic. We came and showed them how to create civilization, how to raise ranches, how to create farm animals, how to plant and create agriculture so they could have a stable society, not a nomadic society. And so they were very appreciative of the technology where they didn't have to constantly roam to support their daily bread. And so it was very beneficial. It was really a trade of technology. They gave us technology, and they did in different ways of understanding nature and other things, and they did give us technology, things we didn't understand, these natural flows of life and so on. They were more dedicated. They understood these things, and they provided us with information, intellectual properties. We provided them with intellectual properties. And then we provided them with manufactured farming equipment and other things so they can cultivate and do many other things, irrigation, many other things that you need to build a civilization. We provided the Native Americans. And it started off very harmonious. But as Jesus shows you with Judas One bad seed could kill everybody. That's the point. You're only as strong as your weakest link. And we allowed the flood in of these individuals. And then I'm looking at a black person right now, and it makes me think of how slavery, and I'll go into this, instead of tapping into the Native American communities for farming down south, and there were lots of Native American tribes, indigenous tribes that would have been perfect working on the farms, doing the agriculture, perfect, integrating them. They used to work, and it is true, and I showed you that Native Americans at a time, until we got that great flux of immigrants, which crowded out Native Americans. Do you know that? The great inflow of immigrants crowded out Native Americans. Native Americans in the 60s and that, because of World War II, the Navajo and their language with the codes and so on, we started integrating them into the military. And then in the 1950s, Native Americans started integrating more. And this is why you see the Native American crying in the 70s, where they throw the public service announcement, you have them in full, Indian attire, and the trash hits their feet, and, the tears come down, and it shows them in the canoe, and so on. But the thing is, that commercial, because Native Americans started getting integrated into society in the 1950s. And in the 60s, they were more. And they started building the buildings in Chicago. They were doing steel work and many other things. And Native Americans started dipping their toe outside the reservation and started integrating with white people. Started living in Chicago, started integrating. What happened to it? They got bit by our government a second time. White people screwed them a second time. How? The Cuban boat people, the refugees, the Vietnamese refugees. We should have stayed in Vietnam. But all these people flooded in, and then we created sanctuary cities with all these illegals. And then Reagan further he did, but that was all Democratic motivated, because he was trying to get the Russians to stop the arms race, which he did get them to do, which made the world a much safer place, and the wall fell. But he had to trade with the Democrats to get their votes on certain initiatives, and he gave them what they wanted. Citizenship for undocumented and documented people. 3.4 million of them became citizens overnight with very little background checking. Which, do you know that move further embedded criminal organizations? Because criminal groups had their people in with the others, and they became citizens as well. We got the good with the bad, as you see in the movie Scarface with Tony Montana. We got the good with the bad. We didn't weed out. So what happened is the Native Americans got undercut in the labor market. And so the Native Americans started coming out in the 40s with World War II, integrating them and everything, and then more so in the 50s. And then it was growing in the 60s at the beginning. And then the civil rights movement started. Then black migration started hitting high points into the urban centers in Chicago and that. And all the illegal immigration, all the unchecked immigration flooding in, Native Americans retreated back to the reservations. And we still haven't integrated them because we keep on flooding in immigrants. And we don't allow them to have opportunities outside the reservations. We don't allow them to have the ability to integrate into society. We keep on trapping them on the reservation. And it's not bad. I'm for developing the reservations and everything and bringing businesses and everything. But the thing is, we don't give them a choice. We constantly do this. And that's what now, number two, the Hispanics and the great migration of them out of the Southwest. Again, going into all these territories, and I worry about this in Canada, where they don't have many Hispanics or blacks. They have Asians, but they don't have heavy immigration, except people coming up from America and that, and trickling from North America into Canada. But I want Canada to integrate their Native American tribes. Give the indigenous people a fighting chance. How many times are we going to screw them? And so that's what the government doesn't understand with these migrational flows. When you had all these flying out of the Southwest and the blacks came in, the Native Americans were crowded out. The Hispanics came in, the Native Americans were crowded out. Illegal immigration came in. Native Americans were crowded out. We keep on crowding them out and giving them no ability to compete. We didn't go into the reservations, University of Chicago, Stanford, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, you name it, Northwestern, and opening up remote campuses in Native American communities. None of them. All the elite schools, why weren't they opening up on Native American campuses, colleges? Why weren't we going there and improving all the Native American high schools? Why weren't we improving their elementary schools, their pre-K? Why weren't we helping them end their drug abuse and alcohol abuse? Why weren't we in there helping them solidify the family again? Because their families, just like the black families, they got fractured on Native American communities. This family, this traditional family, got destroyed. And the community got incredibly fractured. And we had all kinds of birth defects in Native American communities, you name it. I had my friends, they worked on Native American communities, volunteering, helping them. I should have been volunteering on Native American communities with my efforts. And I tried to interact in some ways and tried to help. I donated to the Native American College Fund. I did stuff indirectly with Native Americans. I was for my assistant. Her husband was a Native American and talked about the festival and that, and I supported her wholeheartedly. And we've been screwing the Native Americans. And you never hear debates in state congresses about immigration and how it affects indigenous people. I had a great discussion with an Australian talking about the Aborigines. And this is 2015 while I was studying, and a beautiful Australian girl. Awesome. And I even asked her out at the end of the conversation, but she told me she was with her husband who was sleeping at the Sofitel. But we had a conversation about spirituality, and we had a long conversation about the indigenous the Aboriginal Indians and how to integrate them into Australian society, and watching foreign immigration, making sure they don't crowd the opportunities for the Aboriginals out. So we've been doing a great disservice to Native Americans in many, 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 many ways. And I bent backwards for blacks and Hispanics and everything else. No more. They chose not to reform. They chose to attack me and hurt me. And I was trying to do all this with the Native Americans, truly quiet, trying to work through my friends, trying to solve these problems. And I took all the life-threatening and all the negativity, and I put it aside, and I turned the other cheek with them. But when they hurt me, I was done with it. I wanted to know how they did the Native Americans, how blacks have done the Native Americans wrong, how Hispanics have done the Native Americans wrong, how even, yes, Asians have done the Native Americans wrong, how whites have done the Native Americans wrong. And I was trying to do this quietly. But when you attacked me, I was prepared, and then you silenced me on platforms. The whole point is why I got all the media, the head of Fox News and many other media organizations from all over the country and the world, on LinkedIn and other platforms, was so if you touch me, I destroy you. You're not supposed to protect them. There's supposed to be social backlash like never before. I mean, like way worse than the civil rights movement. And they don't understand with the civil rights movement, what the fuck have they ever done for Native Americans but make their life shittier? So when they migrated out, they displaced opportunities for Native Americans. So let's talk about fairness. So again, we have to think about this, and we got to do a better job with indigenous people. I used to watch the indigenous people all over the world. In Mexico, I watched them get slaughtered by the drug cartels. I watched them get slaughtered in Colombia by the terrorist organizations, drug cartels. Indigenous people live in the mountainous and remote communities and were easy targets for cartels, the hillbillies. And they would go up there with their weapons and that and enslave the indigenous people and make them work in their drug manufacturing and distribution business. It's unbelievable. I watch this harm, and it pisses the shit out of me. And these people talk about injustice. They have no idea what injustice is. And so it's ridiculous. And so I put these out to create awareness. We need to stop making the effing mistake. And we need to go into the Philippines and wipe out the terrorist organizations in their remote regions. In the hills, mountains, they have terrorist organizations which negatively impact the indigenous people in the remote communities. They become very vulnerable. and we have a huge military presence. And I don't understand, with our 750 bases in 80 countries, that their number one thing is to wipe out terrorists in every single country. That is job one of the military. Eradicate terrorists globally. Eradicate terrorists globally. And you will see things will go much better in the Philippines and a lot of other countries. And indigenous people will have a chance around the world in all these countries to get out from under. So, again, we need to do things more justly. Anyways, I'll leave this here, but I'm seriously pissed. And they don't know what harm they did. And they don't know of all the suffering that they brought, that they crowded out in their greed. Their greed. Instead of fixing their country and solving their problems, their greed with unchecked immigration, undocumented immigration, their greed. It wasn't like North Korea where they were starving. You know how many trees in Latin America you can pick fruit off of? It's ridiculous. The food, the fish, and everything else. So, don't tell me they were starving. No, it was their greed. And their greed caused Native Americans in America to suffer unbelievably, suffer and die and rot in a broken community. And they brought into Native American communities, they already had alcohol problems. The cartels used Native American communities to move all kinds of illegal narcotics. So they didn't help Native American communities. They fed on Native American communities, bringing all kinds of drugs and disaster and more grief into Native American communities. It is unbelievable the horror they have done. So I'll post this and I'm going to stop here, but it is unbelievable. Talk about reparations. If I was working for Native Americans, I would be suing across the board all the other races for their damages. And they have done serious damage to the Native American community and the future of their people.